In a front-end focused industry, it's important to remember that there is a customer at both ends of a transaction. IT executive Karthika Mayo has been on all sides of the e-commerce experience. She gives us her perspectives and reminds us your e-com brand promise is only as good as your ability to fulfill it. Literally. I'm Justin Burrows. This is Commerce Chats, my high velocity. Joining me today on Commerce Chats, we have a very special guest, Karthika Mayo, an IT executive. Now, you've spent more than a decade in e-commerce. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm almost 2 decades.
Wow.
Don't
How does that
wanna don't
happen?
wanna age myself, but yeah.
Yeah.
Been about
Yeah.
20 years.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you progressed in e-commerce? Because you've had a few different roles. I've been following you for a while.
Yeah, I sort of fell into e-commerce by accident. So it didn't have anything to do with what I studied in college. I actually studied to be a broadcast journalist.
Uh-huh.
So I had aspirations of being a television reporter here in my hometown of Los Angeles. And I realized I didn't want to do that. So I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. And so I got a temp job for the city of Pomona. Originally, it was to enter traffic citations in the system. It was a very basic level data entry job. I would get stacks of these traffic citations, super boring. And my boss was like, you know what? You're a Northwestern grad, you're smart. Like, I'm going to give you this website project to work on. So, the city of Pomona, where I worked, they were looking to launch a brand new website. They were investing a lot of money in this website. And so it became my job to work with the different city departments, get their requirements, mostly around content to have this site developed. And we worked with a third party agency who developed the site for us. And that was sort of my foray into at least web, not necessarily e-commerce because we weren't doing commerce at the time. But from there, I got more into web technologies. My next job after that was with a travel company. So I worked for the Travel Corporation for 8 years, and we sold escorted motor coach tours around the world. And with that company, we were launching a direct to consumer business because prior to that, all business had been done through travel agencies. And I was a project manager on that. So again, I was involved with working with our business users, with a web development company who was building
Mm-hmm.
the site, got to learn a lot about content management systems, shopping carts, even though it was travel.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. I got to learn all kinds of different technologies besides e-commerce, including the very intricate task of booking things like flights. Like that is
Yes.
very complex.
I think that's really interesting because that move to direct to consumer, like that's still something that people are challenged with today. And I think that's
Yeah.
really cool that you had, because you're making a new channel.
Right. A new channel, a new revenue
Yeah.
stream for the company. I mean, the web was coming up as a channel for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of brands. And so I think it was an intimidating space at the time, and but also very interesting and new. So it was exciting for me to be at the forefront of that.
Yeah. And I think that's something that the lessons you would learn then are still applicable today, of being able
Absolutely.
to, when you're not selling directly to consumer, we see it now. A lot of companies, like, we're getting more and more granular in terms of how brands can present themselves. That you can just go directly, like, what is it? I have like over here, like Liquid Death. They've got a website, and they do, they understand that that's part of it, but who would have thought that people would be selling water and water related paraphernalia, directly to consumer. So I think
Yes,
that's
and
great.
they have the personality behind the brand is what really speaks to, it's water. I mean, everybody drinks water. Water is
Yeah.
very accessible, but the
Yeah.
liquid death is cool. And so
Yeah.
that's, yeah, they've made it cool to drink water.
It's actually like it's a law in New England to have seltzer around you all the time. In fact, I think I have 3, right? Because you can't see my desk. So I got my Spindrift. This is my emotional support seltzer right
Ah,
here. And then I also have a Polar seltzer that's also there just as backup in case my first seltzer doesn't work out. So you move in then to e-commerce and some, not to say that Kontiki Tours wasn't, uh, you know,
we
interesting, but you got
sold,
some.
I took some time off. I
Mm-hmm.
had 2 kids, so I stayed home with them for about 2.5 years, still kept my toe in the water at Travel Corporation working part-time. But
Mm-hmm.
when I was ready to move on, I got an opportunity at Big Five Sporting Goods. Big Five Sporting Goods is very pervasive on the West Coast. There's, at the time, there were about 500 locations, or probably more now, and they hadn't done e-commerce yet. So at that time, they were looking for somebody to help them launch e-commerce. So very similar situation
Wow.
as what I experienced at TravCorp, except this time we are fulfilling physical products. And so if you're not familiar with Big Five, their SKU assortment was over 100,000
Yeah.
SKUs.
Yeah.
So they sold everything from Snuggies to bobbleheads to firearms, like not online, but
Mm-hmm.
Big Five has a very wide assortment. And at the time, we chose Oracle ATG
Mm-hmm.
as the e-commerce platform. And that's where I really learned the direct to consumer fulfillment side of
Mm-hmm.
things. So taking that order on the website, transforming that into an order for a warehouse management system, getting that order fulfilled by the warehouse, sending the communication back out to the customer. And yeah, I was there for about 2.5 years at Big Five, but that was a major, major project that I
Yeah.
worked on.
It's rare for brands, especially those that have brick and mortar things, to be able to introduce them to a market and to do that more than once, I think. And then you get into the fulfillment element. We can get more into that like later, but then you pivoted. You went into some fancy some fancy places since then, and you've been kind of
Yeah, we could say
uh,
that. I spent some time at PacSun, and I was at Elf Beauty for more than 6 years, also doing, direct fulfillment, very involved on the e-commerce side, but really kind of honing my skills on more of the back office and back end side of the house. And I would say that's sort of where I found my niche, because that part of the customer journey or that transaction process is so critical, so important. And it was very important to me that that be as solid of an experience as it is on the website when the customer chooses their item that they want to buy and they give us their money. So I
now. Well,
yes.
wait a second. Wait, no, the e-commerce is just the front end. There's just a front end. This back end, that's something else that happens. It's all front end. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's just this magical, nebulous thing that happens
Well, it's
behind a website. But
I get
um,
stuck in that. I get stuck in that, and I think a lot of people in the in e-commerce get stuck in the front end thing. When you talk about UX, we're talking about a website, but you were suggesting that UX is not just how the page interacts with you. That's one part of it. Explain what happens. I thought it was just elves or hamsters.
I think a great example of why the back end is so important is what I'm doing today, which is at Venus et Fleur. So Venus et Fleur, talk about fancy. We
Mm-hmm.
sell very high end arrangements, flower arrangements. So everything is made to order. So when a customer visits the Venus et Fleur website, We have multiple arrangements to choose from, different floral compositions, different bezels, so vases, hat boxes, ranging from $200 all the way to $2,000 plus dollars on the
Mm-hmm.
website. So once that customer places that order, which is typically a gift, so usually they're buying the arrangement for a loved one, a family member, what have you, that experience of ensuring that the item that they purchased is exactly what they wanted and in the most pristine condition possible, that
Mm-hmm.
all falls on operations and the back end of the process.
You talk about it being a gift, and just how important that is in terms of like, there's my experience as a person buying it, but you are really putting a lot of your personal stake in with the company because you're trusting them to not send something that's lackluster.
Absolutely. It's thought, love, care, white glove, all of the things that make it very special for the
Mm-hmm.
recipient. We allow the customer to uh, write a message and a card so they can give us their message. We'll print it on a card. Everything comes beautifully packaged. This is an e-commerce business, so it's
Mm-hmm.
not arriving on your doorstep in a vase. It's coming in a box. So
Mm-hmm.
if you think about the boxes have to be able to handle super fragile items. So there
Mm-hmm.
is a methodical way that these items are packed to ensure that there isn't any damage to the flowers. And when you open it, the smell is incredible. And
Mm-hmm.
when you take it out of the box, it looks just as beautiful as it did on the website.
Right.
So, how do we get to that? Like the designer has to know how to build that arrangement, and that all comes in the back end. So we do, some manufacturing of the arrangements. So it is a process where we have floral artisans putting together the arrangements. No two arrangements look exactly the same. There's always going to be variation, especially when you're working with things like flowers, but the quality has to be there. And so otherwise we wouldn't be able to sell,
Mm-hmm.
the flowers at the price point that we do. And so we take very seriously that process of making sure everything is quality controlled, everything is checked. So also in the back end, there's multiple, tasks and processes that have to take place to ensure that that order is in perfect condition.
So how do you put that all inside of your mind? I mean, there, like, how do you document? Do you just know? I mean, are you walking around the facility? Do you draw a
No,
picture?
I'm not in the facility. So that's what makes it even more I would say challenging because there's people that you don't see, on a daily basis face to
Mm-hmm.
face. And
Yeah.
they have to understand what are all the different cogs in the wheel of making this arrangement. And so we've taken a lot of steps in our system to ensure that we use bills of materials for all of our arrangements, that everything is documented, that the specs are exact so that there isn't any question about what's expected
Mm-hmm.
in the arrangement. So everything has a spec. Everything is detailed in our system for the designer to follow. Of course, they're trained and so forth, but they may be working on multiple arrangements in a day, and so everything has to be very well documented for them.
When you approach this process of the back of the house of technology, how do you even structure that? I mean, when you came into your role, when in other roles, when you found this niche, like, what was it that attracted you to it, and what how do you decompose it uh from fulfilling your part of the brand promise?
I think first and foremost, there's a user experience side of that also. So if you have a lot of manual or tedious processes or difficult processes, that makes your execution a lot harder. So we want to ensure that things are easy for the users, that the system is set up in a way that they don't really have to think. It just kind of gives them the blueprint of what they need to do. And so I would say, like, even though my background wasn't necessarily in technology, there is a communication aspect that is very important. So you have to be able to break down things that are fairly complicated in an easy to digest and understand manner. And so I think that's where I really found my niche, is that you could easily chalk this up to, oh, it's very complicated. You're talking about APIs and web
Mm-hmm.
services, and this goes here and there in a database. And it's not really that. It's what is the instruction for the
Mm-hmm.
person that needs to do the job.
Yeah.
So to me, that's putting it in its simplest form, even if you have a lot of complex back end technology driving the
Mm.
process.
Yeah. I think that's a great insight to, and I think that, and we saw this in, composable in the front end, or headless if we want to talk about it. And I suppose to a degree composable could have applications in the back end as well, where it's like API first, and these messages, we get so hung up on the technology that we forget to think about, well, what is most basically what we're trying to do. And to your point, you can't do a job well if, or you won't do a job as well, it's my belief, if you're making people do things that are unnecessary, that aren't really geared towards doing the job in an excellent way.
Right.
And it seems simple, right? It's simple to talk about. And that's where you should start, is that simple part. But so often people, jump over that. So, and I
They
think
do.
that I keep on thinking of like wanting to remove drudgery from a process, whether it's on the, for me, I'm always thinking of the front end from a merchandiser perspective, presenting something that's performant and beautiful, but it's not one person downloading an Excel spreadsheet and, massaging it and then re-uploading it somewhere else, and then going through and pressing buttons like George Jetson. Um, but I think that that's humanizing. I think, but when people can, I mean, it must be really satisfying to be able to sit down and make something beautiful, as part of your job. Do that and kind of like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I just do it.
Yeah, I mean, bringing happiness and joy to people, I actually, that's something that's a motto of mine, even
Mm-hmm.
just as a professional. So
Mm-hmm.
work should be fun. If it's
Mm-hmm.
not, then it's just work, and
Yeah.
it's just not as fulfilling or satisfying. So what really kind of drives me is being able to reduce friction for our end users. So
Mm-hmm.
making things much easier than they were before. And we can constantly improve. That's the other thing too. You're never done, right?
Yeah.
There's always a better way to do things. And so I would say that drives me. I'm somebody who used to time myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird, like,
You
little
are
quirk that I
operations.
have.
I can
Yeah.
tell. Yeah.
I guess 'cause maybe it was my journalism training, but I was always restricted to, like, a specific number of words, or when I was doing TV, like, I was restricted to a certain number of minutes for a story or a package. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've always been very, very time driven. And so if something is taking a very long time and I know that it can be condensed and it can be a much shorter process, I'm going to do everything I can to make it shorter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can beat myself, and I can have other people beat myself, meaning like
Yeah.
my previous time. I wish I did that with other things, like more athletic things, but it's mostly
Yeah.
it's mostly with
I'm on a
like my
I'm
job.
on a treadmill right now. This is a running desk. That's what I'm doing. Gotta Peloton. Yeah. No, Yeah, no, I feel that. Yeah, the operations bug, if you want to call it that, where like the fastest way from point A to point B, that really is compelling. Because then if you do it that one way, you can, then it's repeatable. And if it's repeatable, you can improve on it, and you're capturing all. So, you
Yeah,
know,
and a lot of, the improvements can come from new technology and innovation. And so being able to apply that to gain those efficiencies is also very rewarding as a tech leader, and especially somebody that works on the back end.
is there anything you're excited about, like in terms of like technology or something you're working on or approach right now?
I'm excited about AI. So I know AI is a big buzzword right now, but I've been able to apply whether it's Chat GPT or whether it's
Mm-hmm.
Copilot to things to make my life easier. So instead of,
Mm-hmm.
for example, reviewing code or even reviewing a macro in a spreadsheet, I
Mm-hmm.
can ask for help from
Yeah.
AI. And so
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. I think
Yeah.
that, going back to like wanting to have more efficient processes, or at least taking less time on things that might be considered like busy work,
Yeah.
AI is a real game changer for
Yeah.
that. So
It's a,
that excites me. A BI platform that I've been working on with Venus has a built-in chat GPT type tool where you can just ask, like, I want to know how many of a certain SKU I sold in the last 12 months. Instead of running a report, this AI agent can just grab that data for me. And
mm-hmm.
that is very, I mean, it's really fast and it's
Yeah.
accurate.
Yeah, I had on the front end, I mean, yes, I have made AIs of like an angry duck doing QA, you know, easy. Plato, a statue of Plato typing on a computer. Yes. And that's fine. That's great. It makes some engaging content. But where it really blew my mind was catalog management, which is data management. But when you talk about like, well, how should I structure this? What will be a good way for you to do this? Or, what are some things I should think about? And boom, it's there. Or can you
Yeah,
create a data set, from this? And this is all stuff that would take weeks, and
weeks.
now I can try different things. Does this look good or does that, look good? And I think that really it is a little mind bending though. I want to put it in Excel and I want to do the little pivoty things and all of the stuff that I, have been trained to do. But then it's like, no, just here, like, give me a table and make this
That's a
change.
Yeah,
So,
that's a great, well, I think that's why there's also an element of fear there too,
hmm
because these are things that maybe took a very long time to learn,
yeah,
in Excel or whatever other programs you might be using,
yeah,
that
yeah,
now can be done like that.
yeah, yeah. We're finding things where like that's part of the problem with drudgery is that if your job is defined by drudgery, it's vulnerable, but it's if you're in there and you're able to eliminate that, you have something that's kind of like, inherently human, that is, you know not to say that, I mean, Lord knows I still have drudging tasks that I have to do, and I've had jobs in the past that 100% drudgery, I guarantee you. But it does kind of open up the market for trying new things, and experimenting on between complex systems, and I
Yes.
think that that's going to be part of it.
Yeah.
I think it's really important when you're talking about like gifts, for example, because I think of UX like from somebody who has a bias towards the front end. I think of UX as how the site looks, how quickly I can check out, maybe even like an order confirmation. But, you know, if you're buying that for as a gift for another person, you're kind of putting a lot of trust in them to, what that experience is going to be to deliver on the promise, right?
the process doesn't stop when a customer clicks checkout and they've provided their payment information. So that customer is still there on the other side of the transaction. So whether it is a recipient of a gift or it's something that you bought yourself, it didn't just end at checkout. So we have to be committed to ensuring that that customer journey is special and great as it was on the front end when they were viewing the beautiful products that you might have to sell, all the way up until they receive that product at their doorstep. So that is a contract that as brands we make with the customer, and we have to make good on that because it really will impact your reputation as a brand. So I think that second phase, the back end magical, processes that happen
Yeah.
that everybody's like, ooh, what is that?
It just
is
happens.
it is
Yeah.
just as important as the front end experience.
That's fair.
So
That's
yeah,
fair.
and oftentimes that kind of gets back burnered. Oh, we'll get to that later. Oh, that's not important right now. Because I completely get that, because the website is the face of the brand, and so that is the presentation that you want the customer to have and have a great experience with. But again, I would say, if payment doesn't go through, or, we didn't send the right item, or it wasn't packaged perfectly, I mean, these are all things that impact your brand and impact reputation. And so that's why I'm always very adamant that it's just as important, the back end
That's
processes.
that's absolutely, that makes perfect sense. Uh, and I could wrap it there. I just have one more question. Uh, so do you get to talk? I mean, do you guys have a, or rather, just more generally speaking, do you guys have good relationship with what would be, and maybe I am thinking in a manner that is an artifact of a previous age. Do you have conversations between the front end and the back end? I mean, as much as there is actually a distinction there, because it is one flow. How do you communicate with the front end or with people who are more fascinated?
Yeah, I think that what tends to happen is that the front end has a vision of how something should work, or how something should operate, and then we have to make it happen.
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter what job or what brand I've been in, that's usually the case. And that's okay. Like, I think that's fine as long as there's attention to that detail and it doesn't get left out. It's like the worst thing that can happen is that you didn't have a conversation at all, and then your transactions come in and it blows up because the data wasn't formatted correctly, or we got something that
Hmm.
we weren't expecting. So it's important to have that conversation, but understand that it's you have to partner with your front end merchandising team, what have
Hmm.
you, because that is it really frames the experience for the customer. Whereas in the back end, there isn't anything that the customer touches in the back end. So these are all
Yeah.
sort of seamless processes, but it can still uh, color their perception of the
Yeah.
brand if
Definitely.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, if it's not done correctly. So I think, to summarize, I would say it's good to partner with your front end team, but I would definitely say I wouldn't want requirements based on my needs. So,
Hmm.
or the needs of the back end. Like, usually there are ways to make things work.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Um, well, uh, Karthika Mayo, IT executive with more than 10 years experience in e-commerce, in the front, in the back end, direct to consumer, all the things. Thank you for joining me for Commerce Chats. This has been a really, really wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you for having me.
Brought to you by High Velocity, enterprise front end app for your commerce stack. Faster performance, faster development, faster launch, faster change, all with one cost of ownership. speed and direction, high velocity. That means fast.